And good evening, everybody. It's your boy Cruz, the Beast from the East, and you are watching Cruz Inc. Radio 102.8 TV. Glad that you've joined us this evening. Hope that you enjoyed this beautiful day. We had a high today of 7 degrees. Can you believe that? Here in February, that's right, 70 degrees, and we're looking for a low tonight. Only going to drop down to the 40s, so it's going to be a beautiful night. We are excited to bring you this show and thank our sponsor, the G Law Firm. They've been serving Richmond for over 30 years. If you need a personal injury attorney, somebody that cares about you and not just about your case, then call the G Law Firm. You can reach them at 804 226 4111, or you can go to the website at glawfirm.com. Once again, the glawfirm.com. We certainly appreciate them. We also like to thank the venue AK1 and 2. Angela Knight is the owner and operator. If you're looking for a venue that's top shelf and first class, then give her a call. They're located at 1804 East Belt Boulevard. She can be reached at 804 874 6881. We're going to be talking about a topic that continues to grow and grow. And so I am excited to have this young lady back with us. She's been back with us kind of like a co-host and commentary and all of the above. She was first elected to office in 2019, and she is the first African-American woman to be elected to the Commonwealth Attorney's Office here in the City of Richmond. She has been with that office for over 25 years, plus probably 26 now. We'll find out for sure. I'm doing all this by memory. She was the chief, she was the deputy Commonwealth attorney. She holds a Juris Doctorate, so we should be saying Dr. Colette Wallace McEachin. She's a member of several boards, and when it comes to the Bar Association, she's a proud member of this right here. You know, the Delta Sigma Theta, definitely a proud member there, and also a proud member of the NAACP. We are, again, very, very honored to have her here tonight. I'd like to bring her to the screen. Good evening, Dr. Colette Wallace McEachin.
Good evening, Cruz Sherman, the Beast from the East.
In fact, let me run this all together here. The Honorable Dr. Colette Wallace McEachin.
No. Colette is fine. Colette is fine.
How are you doing this evening?
I'm good. Thank you for having me on your show again. And I look forward to an interesting conversation with you, as always.
Absolutely. Anytime we get together, we bring people, not a lot of speculations, but we deal with the facts. And we certainly appreciate our audience tuning in tonight. And people might say, man, I'm so tired of hearing about the Tyre Nichols situation. But again, if you've been following this, it continues to unfold. And we're going to not play Monday morning quarterback if possible, but we're going to deal with what we know so far and try to compare that to your office and what perhaps if that had been the situation here, comparing those two. One of the things, Colette, that people often, especially the general public, don't understand is that first of all, you're a mom, and
Of three.
yeah, mom of three, and that public officials, especially prosecutors and police chiefs and people that hold offices in which you all hold, are unfazed about incidents like this. And I want to bring in first before I ask you about your feelings as a mom first, and then as the chief, as my boss used to say, the chief law enforcement officer in the city. I'm going to play this piece here and then get your opinion about this. This is a unity meeting that we had 3 days prior to the release of the video of the unfortunate incidents in Memphis, Tennessee that occurred January of this year. And of course, I'm not going to play that video. I'm sure people have seen it. And just out of respect for the family, I don't think we need to continue to see it again because it was horrific. It was just unbelievable. But we're going to talk about some of the dynamics of it. But here's our chief here in the city of Richmond. And we're going to be interviewing him on this Friday coming up.
I'm the acting chief of police for the city of Richmond. Today, I asked several members of our Richmond community to come around the table at the Richmond Police Department's headquarters so we could have a frank and earnest conversation about policing and where we are today. I think it was a productive conversation, as you'll hear. When I hear about what happened in Memphis, I must say that I commend the chief of police and the city government and the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. They did exactly what I would do in the same circumstance. They acted quickly, decisively, had a competent and thorough investigation, and then fired those officers, and then quickly moved towards criminal charges and appropriate charges under the circumstances. So I wanted to have a dialogue with folks, to hear your concerns. I believe in our community here, and as long as we can provide that security, we want people to express their outrage. We want folks to be able to protest, but what we don't want is to see the violence and the property destruction that we saw in 2020.
I think we have the same sentiment at VCU Police. We pride ourselves on fair and impartial policing. We pride ourselves on treating every single individual with dignity and respect. And the fact that there are 5 police officers in this nation involved in that kind of conduct is really, really disturbing at this point in time where we are.
One of the first things I did when I became the interim chief is discuss core values. One of those core values is establishing legitimacy in our police department. We're establishing trust and legitimacy. We cannot do this job without the community believing that we're there to stand up for them.
Would we get the same attention even here?
All right. Chief made no bones about where he landed with this situation, and was very, very clear in terms of, if that situation had happened here. First of all, as a mother, a parent, a citizen, what were perhaps your initial reactions to the video, to what you saw, if you viewed the video?
So, as a mother, as a parent, as any moral, right-thinking person with a lick of human morality and common sense would have thought, I was horrified. I was appalled. I felt disbelief. I felt a sense of disbelief. That is emphasized by the fact that Tyre was within yards. I think people said something like 100 yards of his mother's house. And I know that everyone by now has heard that he was calling for his mom as he was being beaten. And that just brought back to my mind all of the movies and documentaries that we have seen, especially in this Black History Month, of those things being perpetrated against African American men, for the most part, by white men. And here we are in 2023, and that behavior is being perpetrated by 5 African American police officers against someone who could be their brother. It was just despicable.
You're right, and being from Memphis, we already have to deal with, April the 4th. It was a city that will ever be in history where Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated, and we had those riots, and I heard it said that it is deplorable that Dr. King died and many others died for these officers to even be able to have the privilege to wear that uniform and to be a part of that organization, the Memphis Police Department, and then in the very city that he lost his life for civil rights and equal rights. There with the sanitation departments, there with the black unions to get us equality. We basically, for lack of a better word, turned our backs on everything that we and others have fought for.
Yeah.
That's heart wrenching.
Yeah, it is. It is. And I have to say, probably like a lot of other people, because of the historical racism in America, when I first heard about the incident, before I had actually seen anything or read anything, I was like, oh no, not again. This is George Floyd all over again. This is a bunch of white officers, you know, committing a public lynching of a young black man. And so when I saw that there were 5 black male officers about the same age, some of them, as Tyre Nichols, it's just mind blowing. It's just mind blowing.
You heard the chief said that he commended the chief there and the DA, which the DA is comparable or the same as the CA. Is that correct?
Yes, yes. In Virginia, they're Commonwealth's attorneys, but in a lot of other states, they're district attorneys. Yes.
So, in this, and again, you and I have had conversations at length about the different levels. We have the Attorney General here, and then we have you are the CA for Richmond. Ben Crump said this was very, very quick actions based on the movement of both the chief of police, the district attorney, and others involved in that. Why is that astounding that he would say this is the blueprint of things to come? And I want to kind of make a little footnote because I did a little digging, and I saw somewhere in some research that this was 20 days that it took to terminate these officers, bring charges, fire them next, and then terminate them. That's what is being said. 20 days. But it was also said that this is not the quickest time this has ever been done. That actually Derek Chauvin was less time than this. So again, why is this such a big surprise, though, that justice in this particular case was brought so swiftly?
I think it's a surprise once again because of the history. I think if someone had an Excel spreadsheet and they had listed out over the past, 5 years, 10 years, length of time between date of event, when charges were filed, or if charges were filed, when officers were fired or not fired, when officers were decertified or not decertified, I think that you would see that that period is usually weeks or sometimes months. And I know that a lot of times the explanation is, well, we need to do a thorough investigation. We need to watch the body-worn camera video. We need to talk to witnesses, et cetera, et cetera. Sadly, one of the positive things that has happened since 1920 and the murder of George Floyd is that law enforcement, including Commonwealth attorneys' offices and district attorney offices, law enforcement realizes that justice delayed is justice denied. And that justice delayed can be being transparent to the community. And so like Chief Edwards said in that snippet that you showed, I also commend the district attorney and the police chief for acting quickly. There was body-worn camera. The body-worn camera is clear. I'm assuming that the Memphis police chief was able to get copies of any 911 calls, any internal police communications that wouldn't otherwise be made public, review each officer's activities immediately before and after that event, and have enough evidence to feel confident that firing them and moving for their decertification quickly was the appropriate thing to do.
Now, the night that we had a visual here, you had released a statement to be read at that visual. Can you summarize and for us the essence of your statement to the citizens of Richmond here in terms of your where you stand and this, and would have reacted if that had been here in our city?
Yeah, so I was out of state, and so I was not able to attend the vigil, but I did. I was in contact with Mr. Charles Willis, and he did read the statement. And in summary, my statement was essentially what I had just said, which is, that I was disgusted and appalled by what had happened. That I also, like Tyre Nichols' mother, did not want the community to react with violence, but that the community, law enforcement, were all working and were going to work to make sure that Richmond was safe and that something like this did not happen in Richmond. And if it did happen in Richmond, that it would be dealt with, as the chief said, decisively, without a lot of prevarication. So that was my statement.
Do you feel that because things move so swiftly, that a lot of what we saw in 2020 with George Floyd was averted because of the transparency of the those officials in Memphis?
Yes, and I also think that the swiftness of what they did was significant. I thought the fact that what happened was clear, that there wasn't any of the possible questioning, such as for Mr. Arbery, I think in Georgia, was the one who was chased by 2 truckloads of individuals who thought that he was burglarizing a vacant home or a home still under construction. And there wasn't any doubt that the officers assaulted Mr. Nichols in Memphis immediately after he was stopped for reckless driving, which reckless driving has yet to be shown, but that was allegedly what they stopped him for. And then once he was able to get away from that beating and run towards his mother's house, they caught up with him and essentially beat him to death on the streets in Memphis. That can't happen. It did happen, but that can't happen.
And there were, bits and pieces with the body cam, but it was that the security camera that was in the neighborhood that really told the tale in its entirety of what Tyreek went through, what each officer did or didn't do, what the fire EMS did and didn't do, what the members of the sheriff's department. And people might ask, well, what did the sheriff's department in Memphis? The sheriff's department, they do respond to calls because it is the Memphis is in Shelby County, and so there's a basic collaboration between the police department and the sheriff's department. Just in case, unlike our sheriffs here, they primarily take it to jail, serve warrants, and court system. So this thing was far and wide, and just recently, Colette, it was just noted as of yesterday that 8 more people could be involved in this. Uh, and let's go back to what you said. This was an alleged reckless driving stop.
Mhm.
And now we have approximately 15 lives that have been changed forever.
Mhm.
And people are going to say that, there's a lot of conspiracy theories out here that, uh, unfortunately, this man lost his life because of perhaps some jealousy. When you hear that as a prosecutor, does that basically, to you, make you fight harder for the victim, or in this particular case, it doesn't matter or would not matter?
So let me ask you, when you say something about jealousy, did one of the officers and Tyree supposedly have some connection?
Yes, and I'm gonna keep it in the frames of legality here. Allegedly, Tyreek was involved with someone or knew someone that talked to a female that was a co-worker, and this co-worker had relations or with one of the officers. And as of today, that officer has been, and you mentioned this, decertified, and we're going to talk about that
Mhm.
because he took photos and sent said
Uh,
photos to the female and other acquaintances. Now, none of this has been proven, but that social media conspiracy about the pictures turned out to be true.
okay. So I had read in the New York Times article today that an officer had taken pictures of him while he was propped up against one of the police cars after they had finished beating him. But I had not heard about some possible romantic or jealous connection. But you know what? That is completely irrelevant because there obviously is no excuse, whether it's jealousy or fear or anger, whatever, for 5 uh, certified law enforcement officers to stop an individual, what, to intimidate him, to make some kind of point, and then for everything to get completely out of hand. And so my concern, um, going to a point you raised, Cruz, is that it wasn't just these 5 officers. Now it's, another 8 officers. It's Memphis EMS. It's Memphis Fire Department officers responding. I mean, that is a very scary cultural dynamic that I think needs to be examined by the leaders of that city. How can you have people from 3 or 4 or 5 now, including the sheriff's count, the county, Shelby County sheriffs, from 5 or 6 different agencies, and no one reacted properly. No one reacted with any sense of humanity. No one's called for a supervisor to say, you need to get here because things are getting a little crazy. Because there was certainly time. Um, that's just an appalling lack of training and supervision. And so,
Does this, and this is a word you hear a lot, especially in the legal field, culpability.
mhm.
Is this along that same vein where the reason we've seen so many people being charged is because of culpability, if I'm pronouncing that correct?
Yeah, no, you are. You are. So culpability is just a highfalutin word for being responsible, right? Are you culpable for this incident? Are you somehow responsible for this incident? Did you have a duty to act and you didn't act? Or you had a duty not to act and you acted in violation of that duty? And so there are obviously a spectrum of culpability. Obviously, people who are actually there and participate, are usually legally going to be held more culpable than a supervisor who wasn't there and so didn't participate in the beating, but should have responded more quickly or should have advised them to do something. So there are levels of culpability, and the legal system will address all of that.
Just again, based on how swift things are moving, um, in your opinion, you think this will be a speedy trial, or is this probably going to get more complicated as different officers now are starting to, tell their side of the story, talk to attorneys? There was one young man that came out, one of the officers, Justin Smith, said today, well, I wasn't even supposed to be there because I was on desk duty, and they called me out, and because of my knee injury, I didn't get out the car immediately, and so we see even that night when the incident occurred, you could hear pieces of the story starting to come together, where one officer, well, he tried to grab my gun, and another one said that he was strong as hell, and just an array of things that really in the public eye, somebody that again has been on both sides talking about policing and trust. That goes a long way to damage trust, both from within the police department and from the point of Joe citizen.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that?
So to answer your first question, is it going to be a quick trial? No, it absolutely will not be a quick trial. There are two things. First of all, they're charged by the state. I don't know whether or not the feds are interested in any federal civil rights violations, but that could be a whole separate sphere of trials. But even if you just look at the state trials, you have the 5 officers who are there. I don't know whether the district attorney there is going to try to join all of those officers' cases so that the citizens and witnesses who will have to testify don't have to come to 5 different trials. So in Richmond and in Virginia, you have something called a motion for joinder. And so if there are multiple offenders, multiple defendants who all essentially participated in the same thing, you go to the court, and the court has to order joinder so that the witnesses and citizens are not inconvenienced by having to come multiple times to repeat the same events for 5 different trials. So there are going to be issues about joinder, and then you're just scheduling 5 attorneys and 5 defendants and finding a courtroom big enough for 5 defendants if they're all tried at the same time. It's going to take a while just to orchestrate the logistics of something like that. I would also anticipate that some police officers are going to cooperate with the district attorney's office and turn state's evidence. And it may be that those officers who feel that they are less culpable, as you said, and therefore are looking at possibly a lighter charge or lesser sentence, would be willing to honestly tell the court what happened and what led up to the decision to make the initial stop, what happened at the stop, what happened at the initial decision to pursue him, and then what happened at the actual beating.
There's a lot of wheels that are turning there. And then we get into what we hear quite often, jury pool. This is a national case. It's been all CNN, and I don't know, unless you live in Butte, Montana, somewhere, you hadn't heard about this. But as a prosecutor, how would that concern you going and preparing for this case, and some of the defendants decide they want a trial by jury?
Mm-hmm.
How does that come into play with your strategy if you're trying to prepare for a trial and you got to pick out jurors that is such a high profile case?
So the Supreme Court of the United States has made it clear that there is a pretty high bar in order to move a jury, in order to try a case in a different jurisdiction, right? Because lots of events are horrible and horrific, child abuse cases and other homicides get a lot of publicity, but it's not enough that there was publicity about the case. The publicity has to be shown to have so affected an individual juror that they can't be impartial and listen to the evidence and make a decision just based on the evidence that's presented in court. And that's a really high bar. So I would not be surprised if one of the defendants moves to for a change of venue, to move the case out of Memphis to some other city in Tennessee, but it's unlikely that will happen.
Now, Colette, and let me preface this by saying this in no means is demeaning of police departments anywhere, because, again, I ride with these guys just about every week, and I am not defending the actions of those officers, because I stand very clear that they were horrific. And as a black man, it makes me shudder. Even now, I play in my mind, even though, what I would do, even to this day, if pulled over by officers. The same thing I teach my sons is that, especially one of my sons, he has tinted windows. I said, roll all your windows down, turn off all your music, don't make a lot of movement, keep your hands where they can see. And as we saw recently here with the VCU incident, comply. A lot of people say, well, if you still comply, the chances are that the same thing can happen. Well, chances are, if you comply, it won't happen.
Mm-hmm.
So I was saying this to lead in this question. The CA's office, DA's office, whatever you call it, and the police department work closely together. How difficult is it when you have cases that involve officer bad behavior, officer shootings, and then you have to basically try those officers, many of them that you have relationship with, at some point in time?
Yeah.
Professional relationships, let me put it like that.
Yes. So I want to make clear to your audience that while the Commonwealth Attorney's Office and any prosecutor's office certainly works with law enforcement, we don't work for law enforcement. And we are not there to make law enforcement look good or to cover up what law enforcement does. We are there as ministers of justice overall. And if a law enforcement officer has done something that is unjust and the Commonwealth Attorney's Office has charged them, then we are going to prosecute them with the same vigor and the same intelligence that we would pursue someone else. Your status as a police officer cannot protect you from the law.
Now, there is a term, and I hope that it's widely talked about. There's an immunity that officers have. Impunitive immunity, is that?
Qualified immunity.
Qualified immunity, okay.
Mhm.
Let's talk about qualified immunity. Please tell us, what is that?
Oh gosh. All right, so that's a whole legal course, but let me think of how to say this. The state of Virginia is a sovereign. If you think of the sovereign as a king, the state of Virginia is sovereign. And so the state of Virginia and its public employees generally have some type of sovereign immunity from prosecution or from liability, as long as they are performing their acts and their duties in the manner in which they're supposed to do so.
Mm.
Police officers don't have that high level of sovereign immunity. They have a more qualified immunity. And once again, there's certain metrics that have to be hit for them to be able to say, I should be immune from liability because I have qualified immunity from this charge. And I can tell you that's not going to happen in this case.
Well, I certainly appreciate that, and again, because you hear the legal arguments, you hear the pontificators talking about, that so many officers have gotten off because of that, and again, I can tell you from watching videos of, and most police departments, I would say police department that's certified, when there's a use of force, there's a review board.
Mhm.
And that review board looks at the body cams to see if the force used was in compliance or not in compliance. And there are civilians that are on that board. And I had the opportunity recently to be invited to look at videos and determine whether or not, there's a violation of a policy. And Colette, I found it very interesting because when you're looking at the body cam, and this is again what helps to determine whether or not there's going to be charges or pending uh, disciplinary actions,
Mhm.
there is a split second of whether or not somebody actually was self. What can I say? They brought them on themselves, as we say in the country. And in this case, I've heard people say, well, he shouldn't have ran the first time.
Yeah.
He shouldn't have ran the first time. And I'm thinking about that review. Okay, even if it was a traffic stop, somebody coming to the vehicle, guns blade out, screaming, and you have no idea why. I think everybody has that fight or flight in them at some particular point in time, especially if you're in the dark,
Mhm.
someone's pointing a gun, and they just brutally pull you out of your car. I can't see any justification. I don't care how many times I looked at that, try to rationalize that, because I've heard it. It's always said he shouldn't have ran or he should have complied. That is some bull sometimes, and it's so easy for people to say, they shouldn't have ran. I think, and again, this is just my opinion, as Black people, we're just prone to know that a lot of times we're not going to end up on the right end of a police stop
Mhm.
in most cases. I've led that to say this. You hear about police reform, but I'm asking a question, and I've asked this several times. How can you reform a person's mind and behavior? Please help me with that one. In terms of would police reform
Yeah.
change the culture of what we're seeing? And sadly enough, and I'm going to say this because I believe it, because we're dealing with humanity,
Mhm.
we will not see the end of this with Tyre Nichols.
He will not be the last person who goes through this. Yeah, you would have thought after George Floyd, everybody would have been like, okay, we understand, we understand what we've done wrong. And we're going to have different training. We're going to have a different mindset in a police department. And I want to make clear that my office obviously is not the police department. I'm not speaking for the police department. They have a very good and effective chief in Rick Edwards, and you already had a clip from him. Um, so what I'm saying extends not just to police departments, but also to Commonwealth attorneys' offices and probation offices and judges and everybody who's involved in the criminal justice system. Um, was affected by George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and all of the horrific deaths that seem to have occurred in the past year, 2, 3, 4, 5, however far back you want to go, to Amadou Diallo in New York in 1999. Everybody in the criminal justice system is much more aware and much more educated about the historical effects and impacts of racism in this country, and how law enforcement is perceived by a lot of African American people, which makes what these 5 officers did even more mind-blowing. I can't think of a better word than literally mind-blowing. So I say all that to say that each of them, I'm sure, thought that they would never do that. They would have thought the day before, I would never do that. Or if I was there, I would stop it. Or I would call my supervisor, or I would have done this, or I would have done that. And as a Commonwealth attorney, as a prosecutor, we see that every day with defendants who come into court and, I'm not a criminal. It's like, yes, but you just killed this person. But that's not really me. It's like, well, that seemed to be you when you were pulling the trigger on the body-worn camera on the video. Well, and then there were lots of excuses and explanations and things like that. So ultimately, every individual, and there's actually a jury instruction that says this, every individual is responsible for the natural and probable consequences of your actions. There is a jury instruction that is used all the time. Every individual is responsible for the natural and probable consequences of your actions. And ultimately, it is each individual's responsibility to act the right way. To your country sayings, Cruz, although I don't know if Memphis is country, but right, act like you got some sense.
Right.
Act like you got some sense. But what happens is, sadly, what happens is you get a mob mentality. And so one individual who would not have done something by himself is okay doing it with his buddy or his pal. And then when you have 2 or 3 or 4 people doing it, then I can't think of the phrase, but there's a phrase for what happens when kind of the collective hive mind gets taken over by this mob mentality, and people just literally lose all their common sense.
Well, Professor Wallace McEachin, interesting that you mentioned that, because there was a professor, I think he's from Harvard. He's a Black professor. He talked about small mob mentality, and basically this happens time and time again. Is that individually that person probably, if it had been a lone stop, wouldn't have done that. But once everybody convened, it was like, okay, all training, all common sense, everything's out the window now, because we're running off pure emotions here. Nobody's in a logical frame of mind. And again, this happens when you see the KKK or racists or nationalists. We saw it at the
January 6th.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
When you get a bunch of fools together, then you go have chaos. And I don't mean to call them fools, because like you said, and many others have said, I don't think that morning or the day before they woke up and said, we're going to beat somebody to death.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we did hear that one officer say, we hope they kick the crap out of them, but again, that was in the throes of emotions here.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I was saying police reform is good, but how do we reform it? We talked about this question when we talk about criminal acts, with people shooting and the mass shootings and shooting in individuals that have nothing to do with the situation. How do you reform the mind? How do you reform the heart? How do you, teach humanity? And that's what we saw, was the lack of humanity. We saw the lack of compassion. We just saw this chaos unleashed.
Yeah. I mean, in Richmond, police officers have to go through a really intense interview process that lasts months. And then once you're accepted into the police academy, you are trained in the police academy for, I want to say, 6 to 8 months before you're allowed out on the street. And once you graduate from the academy, you're with a field training officer who is essentially your supervisor on the street. And so there are months of training and months of supervision that go in before you even hit the street. And I don't know how long any of these 5 officers had actually been patrol officers, but they had 2 years, 2 months.
2 years. Most
years.
of them had finished their training and graduation and everything in 2020. So
Okay.
they had basically been a part of the police department in its full capacity about roughly 2.5 years going into 3.
So that's even more interesting. So they are at the academy being trained while the country is going up over George Floyd. They saw what happens when you have bad policing. I'm absolutely sure that they had classes and lectures about don't do this. This is not how you engage with the community. This is not how you respond to something on the street. This is not how you respond when there are no weapons on the other side. They had all of that training. And so even though they are relatively new officers, as you know, would anybody be in a profession when you've only done it for 2 years, they were still trained and they were certified and they were sworn to protect and serve their community. And they violated that oath in all kinds of ways. And they should be decertified. And there's a decertification process in Virginia. And so if that had happened in Richmond, I'm sure that Chief Edwards would have moved for decertification also.
Yeah, there's so much more that we can talk
Yeah.
about. We're going to have to come back and continue this conversation again. There was a clip that I was going to show, and the young lady, this was just within the last 17 hours, of one of the officers was involved, that he had a history
Mm.
of this type of behavior. And we talk about culpability and whether or not there are going to be some superiors, maybe some other people that may have, if nothing else, disciplinary things brought against him because there was a pattern.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah.
That was a pattern.
Yeah. And you know, the Richmond Police Department has a whole internal affairs division, as you well know, that investigates charges against officers. And those charges can be made by a civilian, they can be made by another officer, they can be made by anybody in the public. And the internal affairs division is kept separate. I mean, they're kind of their own little silo so that they can effectively investigate those allegations and, if necessary, make a recommendation to the chief of police about whether or not a crime is committed and whether or not there should be some internal police administrative punishment.
I'm going to say that one, Colette, because there's that clip. The young lady said that she did all that. She went to internal affairs, that there was, nothing said about this officer until after the unfortunate incident, in which she and her attorney is saying, if you all had acted sooner, there's a probability that that particular officer, who seems to allegedly have the more personal engagement that did a primary more of the severe damage to Tyreek, that he would possibly be still alive today. Again, this thing is going to continue to snowball. But how do we, from your office standpoint, when you've gone the gamut, can and I don't want to open up a floodgate because somebody will take this and you have 10,000 calls tomorrow, but can citizens, if they're not getting the proper answers, there's nothing is going on, can they file a complaint with a DA's office or a CA's office?
So they can certainly let us know, but honestly, what will happen is we will refer their complaint back to the police. And I know that seems like a closed loop, and it's like, well, that's just, the fox guarding the hen house. But we don't have, our office does not have any independent investigators. So we don't have the resources or the manpower to do an investigation of a particular officer. The police have that. And then once they make, as I said, their determination, if they forward it to me and an officer has committed a criminal offense, he or she is going to be charged, which is not unusual in Richmond. It's not an unusual occurrence. Luckily, most of those officers who are charged have not committed a felony or a violent offense that has severely or permanently injured someone. And so even though, it's on the public record because they're not protected any more than a regular citizen, it doesn't receive the notoriety and the publicity that some of these other cases get.
I want to say this as we get ready to close. And again, this is because I know the culture. Part of what chaplains do for the Richmond Police Department is that we're there specifically to ride with the officers, to engage with them, and hopefully be able to see, if there is any red flags. We're not there, like I said, to police them. We're not there to snitch on them. But this is for the overall mentality and well-being of the officers, which I feel is a good thing because it shows that the police department, especially here in Richmond, is committed to making sure that policing in our area is above, reproach. Things happen because people are human. But I am assured with the new acting chief Edwards that he stands by his word, and if there's bad apples, he wants to remove those bad apples. And with that being said, knowing you, Colette, for over the last 3.5 years, you are a prosecutor of integrity. You hold your fellow prosecutors and those that work for your staff at a high level. And we want to thank you and thank all of those that work with you for what you all do to ensure that citizens like myself can rest assured that cases will be tried, and they will be tried with the blind lady of justice.
They will.
Any closing words here that you have for our citizens, for our community, in terms of you and your office and what you all are trying to do proactively with the community and make that relationship better?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you, Cruz, for inviting me back to your show. I really appreciate it. I want to thank the Richmond community for being so thoughtful and for not resorting to any violent actions as a result of what happened in Memphis. I want to thank Charles Willis and all of the leaders who came together, the mayor, a number of city council people, to publicly recognize as leaders of the city the trauma that had occurred in Memphis, and to say, as I said, never again, never again, not in Richmond. This is not happening in Richmond. To the extent that that sounds empty and that I can't promise that, that's true. I can't promise it, but that's the goal. That's the work that needs to be done by the police and by my office and by citizens and by the community. That's the goal. That's the ideal. That's what we're reaching for. And we're going to keep reaching until we attain it. So thank you so much, Cruz.
Absolutely. And again, I want to say on a personal level, thank you so much, Colette, for being here tonight. We understand that it has been a difficult last 3 to 4 months, and that again, our prayers are continuing to be with you. And we just want to take a moment here. I wanted to say this from the end because there we lost a champion that I call for the people. And, there's an election coming up February 22nd, if I'm not mistaken.
21st.
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 21st, okay. But no matter whoever is in that office, they're going to be filling some large shoes, very large shoes, for a man that cared about his district, cared about the people. And I just want to take a moment to say we certainly appreciate him so much for everything that he did for us. So I'm going to do something here for just a moment if I do it right. God bless you and your family. We love you. We appreciate you. We much love and respect for you.
Thank you. Please know that you or anybody in Richmond can always find me. I'm in the courthouse 9 to 5, 5 days a week. Please contact me if you have any questions or concerns. I'd be happy to talk with you directly.
And on that note, ma'am, no more TikTok dancing. That's everybody.
You just had to get that in.
I just had to put that in. Okay,
Okay.
somebody's gonna say, okay, what
was that about?
that?
Inside joke. Inside joke.
Yeah, inside joke. Definitely. Just hold on just a minute, Colette. I'll be right back in just a second here. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. This was, again, one of those conversations that we wanted to bring to you to get some inside thoughts from our Commonwealth attorney here in the city of Richmond. And, it's not always easy to talk about certain topics, but I go to the people that I know that are not going to say what I want them to say, or they're not going to, give you that fluff answer. Colette is one of those that's going to give you, as we say back in Memphis, old country saying, straight off in the can. And it's going to be, she's going to be completely transparent. We also have a police chief that is transparent also. We have some very good officers. I commend those officers on what they do day in and day out. And as I said in a meeting, it's not what you do when people are looking, it's what you do when people aren't looking and when the cameras are not on is really what determines what type of person you are. So again, thank you for tuning in. If you have any comments, any questions, you can always email us at cruisinkradio@gmail.com. Thank you for just your support. And as I always say, whatever comes from the heart reaches the heart. Let somebody know how much you love them and care about them before it's everlasting too late. Have a great rest of the evening, and we'll be talking to you soon.
What happened was a machine came down, clamped both of my hands down, and had removed 6 digits. I was in a bad situation. I didn't know what else to do, and I know I needed some type of help, so I called a G law firm. They gave me confidence throughout the whole case that everything was going to be fine. They are not only lawyers, but they are family. Call the G law firm. I did.